Hi everyone, thank you for attending the webinar. This webinar, as you may have seen, is going to be about the value of nature. So first, we'll just start with a presentation by both the speakers who have graciously joined us despite their busy schedules, Michael Onyebuchi Eze and Pakhi Das, and we'll follow that up with a Q&A session. So onto the topic, nature conservation is a pretty highly debated topic because it's difficult for some to understand its value. This touches upon the value nature has to humans, this webinar, and to itself from both monetary and philosophical perspectives. People can attribute differing values to nature as they conceptualize it in different ways. Nature can have a more symbolic and personal meaning for some, while for others it may simply be a source of goods and services. And these varying contextualizations can be categorized in two ways. So broadly, one way is as an intangible, and the other way is because of the monetary value, because of the ecosystem services uh, it provides. So there's these two categorizations, and with us will be our esteemed guests, Pakhi Das and Michael Eze. Yeah, Pakhi is an early career conservation strategist working as an independent consultant on sustainable infrastructure development in India. She has a master's in sustainability and environmental studies from the University of Strathclyde, and she has around 2 to 3 years of experience working with WWF India as project officer in the Wildlife and Habitat Division. And our other guest, Michael, is the assistant professor of global and comparative philosophy at Leiden University and formerly a visiting scholar and research associate at Stanford. He has a PhD in political science and international studies from Cambridge University and a PhD in history and cultural reflection from Universitat Wittenherdecke, Germany. He was originally from Zimbabwe, and he's an African humanist that subscribes wholly and fully to the doctrine of Ubuntu in theory and practice. So, Michael and Pakhi, thank you so much for joining us. They will now begin to share their presentations. So, yeah, so the floor is yours. Thank you so much for joining us once again.
Hi, Ajay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining in. I have a quick presentation. So the value of nature. Before we start, there's a quick introduction. Ajay's already introduced me. However, I am an independent consultant. I'm currently working with 2 organizations, and I'm also pursuing a postgraduate diploma in environmental law and policy. I've studied environmental sustainability and environmental studies from the University of Strathclyde, and I worked with WWF India for about 2.5 years. My main area is sustainable development, and I do a lot of research on the kind of development infrastructure projects that are coming in forest areas in India. So before I start, a quick note, nature for me is equivalent to forest. So when I think of nature, I think of forest. I'm sure nature includes a lot more other things. But so basically, why do we value nature? I'm sure everyone's has some idea of what this diagram says. The benefits from the nature are tangible, intangible, and then they can be kind of segregated into all of these various categories. So there is the provisional, there is cultural, there's supporting, regulating. And all of these benefits are something that that economists have come up with. So we see these, and then we can associate every natural aspect of the environment, like every aspect of the environment, providing us with these benefits. So when the Talk Dirty to Me team reached out to me for the seminar, I actually started to try to think, what do I value nature? And I am a conservationist, I belong to this field, but still I wasn't sure. And honestly, I still am not sure. I don't know. Do I value nature because it's pretty? Because climate change is scary? Because animals are cool? And like there are many reasons of why one values nature, and none of these actually give me any kind of specific benefit. There is no monetary benefits for me. Of course, there are the intangible, the clean air, the clean ocean, all those benefits exist. But why do I value nature is something that I'm still kind of trying to understand. But whatever the reasons, we know it is extremely important. And there are, like, all countries in the world have somehow tied themselves to conserving environment and forests. And there are multiple rules, regulations, international agreements, just so that whatever is left of the environment is preserved for the nature, for the future. these are the list of environmental laws and frameworks in India. And as you can see, there are a lot of rules that we've come up with just so that we can save environment, save nature, which kind of makes me think like nature might be extremely valuable. Similarly, there are a lot of international agreements that India is signed up on. And that again makes me wonder if like, what is the value of nature? And through all of this understanding, I know that it is extremely valuable, but from my field of study, which is development, I've come to this conclusion that nature is extremely valuable unless you put it on the scale next to development. And once you put nature next to development, the value seems to decline. So the rest of my presentation is kind of in comparison between nature and development, because that is again one my areas of expertise, and that is something I engage with a lot. Once you start comparing nature and development, all the rules that we just saw suddenly become bottleneck for development. And this is something that I've been studying a lot, that as soon as we talk of development in comparison to nature, nature just suddenly becomes something that is a hassle for development. In India, for the past maybe 7 to 8 years, we've been thinking of nature and the value of forest as something that needs to be given up for development, because right now the development is like the main motive of the economy in India. So these are some screenshots from the newspaper articles, recent newspaper articles rather, wherein forest clearance processes and everything that has been put in place to preserve and protect the value of nature has actually been questioned, and our ministers are actually expecting and requesting the environment ministry to do away with these processes. Similarly, a patch of forest or wildlife habitat is valuable only until it becomes a project site for development, after which it is the land and not the habitat which is valuable. So if you look at these screenshots, in the recent past, India has been denotifying a lot of areas which once had a lot of value. Maybe elephant sanctuaries, tiger reserves, all of these areas which were supposed to have a lot of value. And it could be like for whatever services, ecological services, the habitats, anything that they provided, but these are being denotified for the sake of development. So clearly we can see that the value of nature is declining in the name of development. And the only difference between right now in India, the difference between a tiger reserve and a barren land becomes a tangible, a monetary amount that a project proponent might have to pay for securing the development, like the land for development. And this is something I was like, even when I entered the conservation field, I never thought of like a monetary value to nature, but looks like this is the only thing that is dictating what the actual value of nature is. So in India, there's a complete process for any kind of clearance you want to do. In like, if you want to clear any kind of forest area, there's a due process that needs to be followed. However, there are two stages in this where valuation of forest land happens. One is site inspection, and then there's a recommended stage. There are a lot more layers between these stages. However, the valuation of forest land happens in these two areas, wherein there is a specific table, and there is the user agencies kind of have to pay a specific amount to secure lands. And these payments go to this thing called compensatory for afforestation funds. And these values are calculated, monetary values are calculated basis three main factors: location of forest, nature of forest, and the type of industry. So essentially all the ecological aspects, whatever the benefits of a specific forest, and maybe like even the non-benefits, like why do you need to have a benefit for a forest? All of that is not really considered when you consider the present value of a forest. This is I've gotten from the expert committee on net present value. And then the value of environment, essentially, whatever we just saw, let it be like the different benefits, eventually comes down to what is the monetary value of the land. And that is what the value of nature has currently become. So these are different classes. The entire forest lands get classified into various different zones, eco classes. And then, of course, like because a tiger reserve is maybe more important than a barren land, there is some calculation that happens. This is rather unfortunate, but this is what the true value of nature, according to a conservationist right now, is. And what is very interesting to see is these values have been proposed and brought up by people from the economic sector. They are not conservationists who suggested this. And so like it makes me wonder if these important aspects of environment is actually considered when you think of the value of nature. And a lot of times my colleagues and I, when we look up a project, an upcoming project, we have to convince the other person, the developers, the government, that these areas are more important than what value they hold monetarily. So maybe the value of lives and livelihoods of hundreds of local communities dependent on the forest. The value of potential conflict situations. Like a location of a forest might be important because it is home to a tiger landscape, like home to tigers. But as soon as there's a road coming up, the conflict situation is going to get worse. So maybe that value is not considered. There's value of wildlife and where the wildlife even go. Sometimes even the monetary value. I have personally been a part of a conversation wherein we were trying to convince the government not to denotify the elephant reserves because of the monetary, the revenues the tourism brings in. So eventually it is coming down to what money a particular patch of forest or a particular habitat can bring in. And of course, the potential impacts of clearing a forest. Like we can talk about whatever money for a very long time, but there are a lot of intangible benefits which are definitely not considered when we think in the value. These are mostly like what I wanted to speak about, because through the analysis that I've been doing over the last 7 years, we've lost more than 45,000 hectares of forest in India itself. And currently there are more than 9,000 projects in the pipeline. So once these projects are cleared, we would have lost a lot of forest. And which is why maybe this is the time we rethink what is the true value of nature. Do we consider just the economic value, or do we come up with a better formula to actually understand what could the true value of nature be? So that's all I had for today. And I'm actually looking forward to hearing what Michael has to say, because he will bring in a very different perspective. And I'm sure it's not going to be monetary when he speaks. So this is it for me.
Yeah, that was a great presentation. Thank you so much. We'll have the next presentation by Michael now. Feel free to leave any questions you may have in the chat, and we can address them during the Q&A session. And then after this, we will have the Q&A session. So Michael, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for this, for inviting me to give this reflection and conversation. And also, I want to appreciate and welcome my students from Netherlands, but also from Zimbabwe. There are a few PhD students from Zimbabwe online who joined us here online, PhD graduate students. So really, I want to tell them that I can see them. And no, I am not originally from Zimbabwe. I'm originally from Nigeria, but I studied in Zimbabwe. But in any way, Zimbabwe is a second home to me. So it's okay to say originally because it's also a second home. And just following up from our excellent speaker, just a brilliant Pakhi, she just made a very wonderful speech. I enjoyed it. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to draw on that. No, we're going to do something different. No, she comes from this policy, from policy background, policy perspective, and we can see the evidence she has, and so on and so forth, which is telling us actually this is actually the situation as is. This is the situation, and we can see it. It's not that they told us. Now, I'm going to do a more philosophical, reflective approach. So I'm inviting you into a kind of let's philosophize. Okay, let's reason together. So let's think together. So let's move. We've seen the evidence. We've seen the impact. You know, the first presenter showed us this is the consequences. This is the disastrous consequences of what is going on with nature and environment. So what do we do with those information? It's one thing to have the numbers, you know, and it's okay, yeah, it's quantified. It's one thing, but also now let's work on the numbers. What are the impacts on the numbers? And I titled this conversation, it's a more of a reflective conversation. I am because you are. And I'm going to talk more about what do I mean, I am because you are. Because this is also showcases different understanding of the environment. How we see the environment determines how we treat the environment. The relationship between a human being and the environment it is primarily determined how we value it. So we say, okay, the way I regard the environment will determine how I'm going to treat the environment. If I have respect for the environment, if I have respect for myself and I respect for the environment, then I will treat the environment and nature with dignity. So I'm going to draw on philosophy. Okay, let's draw from philosophy. We'll draw on especially African philosophy to make some conversations and negotiate the differences and approaches to the environment. Okay, maybe we should rethink the way we see the nature. Maybe in rethinking nature, maybe we will have a more healthy, humanistic approach towards nature, to say that we are one with nature. I am nature and nature is me. And when nature hurts, I am hurting. If I treat nature with dignity and respect, nature will take care of me. So we're going to remove the dichotomy and the binaries existing between I am as a human being and nature as a thing. So we're going to take a holistic approach on that. Okay, so let's philosophize a little bit. Okay, so of course, you know, the Enlightenment theory of man, because from the presentation, you see the impact of global capitalism, basically. Global capitalism that is the quest for money, for consumerism, pushing our relationship with nature. We have all found ourselves in a neoliberal global capital. We can't avoid it. We cannot say, okay, let's go back to Africa of 300 years ago, or India of 500 years ago, or whatever. It's not possible again. We are all integrated. We're all integrated into global economy. And also that whatever, let me put it this way, that if, let's assume that Washington sneezes, then the price of toothbrush in Sri Lanka begin to go up. Then let's assume that something happens in London, a financial cycle in London, and then you see that the price of whatever, something will go up in China. You see how the global economy is integrated. Amazon is suffering, and then we're going to suffer that in Africa. You see how the whole world is integrated. Now, what is all have to do with modernist capitalism? So, well, the theory of man, how do people see man? Because we live ourselves in this new capitalist vision of man, that man as man, who is a human being. A human being is a man, literally a man. So, which means not woman, but just a man. And a kind of white man, because this is a white man. Somebody like, okay, this is what we mean by a man. Literally biological man. That's the first vision of who's a man in Enlightenment. Because during the Enlightenment, of course, they say, well, we are running away from neo-scholasticism. We want to have a new vision of human person. And this person to be human has to be rational and has to be a man. So this man has also to be individualistic, rationality, but also master of the environment. Okay, because before the Enlightenment, especially I'm using the European experience now. To be a human being, you say, well, it depends on the power of the church or divine right of kings, which means that when the king say you're a human being, you're a human being. If the king says you're not a human being, you're not a human being. But the Enlightenment came and said, well, if you're thinking, if you're rational, you're a human being. It doesn't depend on religion or the king, the divine right of king. But then this idea became globalized through modernity. You know what is modernity? The idea of modernity, capitalize all those things. Okay, well, so that all over the place, through colonialism, it became exported all over the world. That, well, to be a human being, you have to be rational. You have to think like these people. You have to think like certain ways, but also rationalistic capital. So, well, this is it. And what it also means that you have to be master of the environment. You own the environment. So say man, not a woman, just man. When I use it now, that because women were not included in the Enlightenment rationality, blacks were not included. No other person except just a white man. So if there's a man is the measure of all things, which means that I am what I detach is. So that the environment exists only at my service. So it's a yes, it's a shop, we're going to hunting and stuff like that. The nature is, so we have, this is then the context in which we encounter people talking about the environment. We're taking care of environment now. What is happening? So in Western philosophy, now let me go to Western philosophy briefly, then from there I'll go to African philosophy and connect it to global and comparative thinking about nature and how we can bring different understanding and experience. Okay, how do we articulate a shared view of nature in which we can be meaningful to all of us? That can be meaningful to all of us. So this is what it's going to be. So let's start with this one. So that's this view called anthropocentrism. Okay. Anthropocentrism is normally a view, vision of, they say, well, anthropocentrism says that, well, the human person is the center of the environment. This is one that we normally do. Yes, you go to Amazon, clear the forest, do whatever you want. You are in charge. So environmental discourse and nature determines on man's capacity to conquer and destroy the environment. So that only human beings have moral status, which means the view that only a person, a human being, has moral status. So non-human species, animals, plants, they do not have moral status or stuff like that, which means, according to this anthropocentrism, anthropos, that's human-centered, anthropos, so I am human-centered. So I determine what is natural, what is to preserve, what is sacred, what is not sacred, from only one perspective. So it's kind of a gaze. I see only, I am the one who sees the environment, the nature. I determine what is nature, what can be preserved, what shouldn't be preserved. All power belongs to me. That is anthropocentrism in a summary. So plants and animals do not have moral status. They can be appropriated, abused, and exploited at our will. We have so much power. So this is a view, anthropocentrism. And then, of course, we have people who try to make sense of it. Like one of them, this is just exactly one, David Ban here, one of these advocates said that nature is something we live within and as part of it. There's no essential separation, no transcendental dualism, no enlightenment search for objectivity, no pretense of dangerous, chaotic nature, no distant preservation of romantic, whatever the case may be. So they continue in that kind of thing. Well, we own nature, not the other way around. We own nature. We own nature. And then we have different views again. I'm not going to spend time on this because my interest is in the African view of nature. That's my contribution. That's my background. I studied a history of ideas in Germany, University of Wittenberg, and I talked about how ideas emerge. And I studied a second PhD in political science at Cambridge, talking about, again, how we are all interconnected to nature. And this is something that I'm passionate about because nature is to respect nature is an aspect of justice. We can talk about how everybody is connected. We'll talk about human being. You can't talk about a human being without talking about nature. So I ask again, who is a human being? I say, who is a human being? The way you define a human being is what then defines your relationship to nature. And we need to rethink this understanding. So we have biocentrism, ecocentrism, animal liberation rights. These are all wonderful visions, okay? What we're trying to do here is not to say that one aspect is better than the other one, okay? We're not saying that one aspect is superior to the other one. Because we say, well, this is how I come from a moral situation in which a human being determines what is moral. And I said, no, maybe my own is better because I come from an environment tradition where animal rights is better or whatever the case may be. It doesn't say that when I criticize, it doesn't mean that my own position is more superior to the other. These are all different visions and moral stance that we should all respect. So I say, okay, you maybe Ajay, you don't eat meat. And then it's a Pakhi, you like fish, you don't eat, you like meat. I'm just giving an example. The other person doesn't. So they're all different visions. Okay, we should respect the moral status and stance of other people. It's not to say that because I don't eat meat, therefore everybody who eats meat is cruel or evil. No, we respect that. But the question is, how then do we articulate a moral thinking about nature in which we can have a common or shared understanding? And this is what I'm trying to do here. I'm sharing a perspective from an African philosophical view that we could maybe begin to rethink about our relationship with nature. Okay, not that my position is superior to anybody. No, it is not. We're just sharing. We're having a conversation. Okay, so this is different visions of these things. And then African environmental ethics. I like to tell this story, about my village in the rural Nigeria. These are two streams, how people make meaning out of things. So the other one is Uhere, the other one is Ate. There was a civil war in my village, and then people were thinking that during the civil war, it is a myth, okay? So that once the people from my village run and they go behind the river, okay, they go behind the river will just be, the river bank will rise. And then the enemies, when they come into the river, they are not able to swim because it becomes like a big ocean and stuff like that. These are two rivers in my village. And so because of this kind of myth and stories, if you go to my village now, People don't mess around with the water or the trees around it and stuff like that. And this is how myths become a reality. So, well, it's not because that this actually rose, the water in my riverbank rose, whatever the case may be. But you show them how communities are built and stuff like that. They make meaning out of it. What am I trying to say? What I'm trying to suggest is this, that no matter what we think, environment belongs to us. And we can still make meaning out of it, despite the situation. You can say, well, we don't really know if there's a lot of mythology against global warming or whatever the case may be, if it is a myth or not. We are trying to create meaning out of something. So, okay, we are the power, people who create meaning. And from meaning we create, we can form ethical values which everybody can subscribe to. Now, let's go to African vision of man, of humanity, of environment. If in some many societies, we have always binary of, either you are living or living dead, or you say, well, it's either good or bad or whatever the case may be. In my society, in African philosophy, when we talk about people, we talk about the universe of beings, that all beings are created together. So we have the aspect of the living, people who are alive. Okay, this is very important to pay attention to this. Living, we call it Umuntu, people who are living. So you and I, but pay attention, you and I. Okay, then we have living dead, those who have died, but we still think about them. Then we have non-living objects and inanimate things, like trees, mountains, not even trees, like mountains or things that we cannot touch. We still see them. Now, let's go back to the living. The living is not just human beings. We'll talk about the living. We also mean animals. We also mean plants. We also mean things that really have all those kind of things. They are part of being a human being. They're part of our humanity. So we don't talk about man and animal in that kind of distinctive sense, separation and stuff like that. There are many, many examples I can give. In some cultures in Africa, they have what they call totems. You see, like if you go to a village near my own in Nigeria, they don't kill snakes. They say, well, they are descendants of snakes. They don't touch it. And actually, snakes don't bite people in that village, according to some of the legend. They say, well, it's part of our relatives. So they don't touch it because it's part of who they are. So you see somebody going to bed. Some other places, it's like maybe it's a tortoise. Maybe it's an antelope. So they have all those things that they see it as part of their humanity and so on and so forth. So the whole environment, the trees, the animals, is viewed as one and not separated or objectified. And that is what differentiates this vision of a person. So when I say, I am a human being, it's not just you are a man or a woman, but you are a human being, an embodiment of animals, of plants, of spirits as well, of those who have died in the past and those who are not yet born. So that if I am making a step here, okay, this is important, I'm walking from here to this, or I'm going somewhere, I know that I am alive today. Whatever activity I have, I am responsible for the future. Okay, I am also responsible for the future. The past people are part of my identity. I recognize them as part of my humanity. I am not just living alone for myself. I'm living for the past. I'm living for the present, for the living, for the unborn. Those who are not even born yet, they are also part of my humanity. So I said, well, I come to a forest. What do we do with this forest? Should we destroy it? The question is, it's not just how it affects me as an individual, but also about the past, my ancestors who inhabit that forest, but also about the unborn, my future offspring who are also going to be part of that forest. It's not just me in the present, but also all of us as part of one continuity. This is then what it means to be a human being. So we have in African ontological system, we see Muntu, beings with intelligence, okay, God spirit. Then we have Kintu, beings that cannot act on their own needs. Then we have Hantu, this is being of time and space. We have Kuntu, also being of mode. These are all kinds of beings that come together. These are all kinds of beings that come together, and they have to work in dialogue. So, well, you can manipulate different ones, but they all come together to work together. So we don't say, well, anthropocentric, notice the difference now. In Western environmentality, we have anthropocentrism, biocentrism, ecocentrism. They are all a kind of a bifurcated, that is divided into different centers and stuff like that. Now, in African political philosophy, we say, no, they are also wonder, but we bring them together in contemporaneity. We all have to work together. It's not just that animals have rights. No, they have rights, but also human beings have rights. The trees have rights. Everybody else has certain rights. The question is, how do you bring them in a kind of a harmony? How do they work together in a harmonious balance? Yeah, of course, because people still need to go and farm and cut trees. So in some places, people afraid they don't touch animals. In some places, it's trees. So in my village where I grew up, some people is animal. They don't touch certain animals. In my own place, there are certain trees you don't touch. So for these people, other people, animals are sacred. In my own side, trees are sacred. So the question is, how do we reconcile these experiences, moral values, because they all connect, also human beings as well? How do we reconcile all of them? How do we reconcile everybody together? So everything is together. It's in a relationship, everything is together and stuff like that. I think I don't want to spend a lot of time. So this is a story I normally tell. I don't know if you can read this story. This is a story that happened to me some time ago. If I don't know if you can read it, I don't want to waste time, but if you can read it, let me just go through here. I said, as a young child growing up in southeastern Nigeria, I remember my great-granduncle telling me that a small piece of wood I was about to burn in the village square was in fact my great-grand-ancestor, who is the founder of our village. Noticing my puzzlement, he took me to his obi and explained to me how important it is that we as children should revere and not play with the sacred wood. Back to the village square, he showed us a particular tree, which according to him was responsible for the protection of our village. He went on to narrate magical escapades in which the tree enabled our warriors to become invisible during clashes with neighboring villages. This particular tree is a totem for our village and must be treated with reverence in whatever part of the world we find it. Many years later, I found the tree in the Jeju Retreat House in Zimbabwe being used as an ornamental tree. I remembered my late uncle's exhortation and smiled with nostalgia. I felt a great affection for it, as if I found a long-lost relative. What does this tell us? It tells us, well, this is the fact that I have found a relative. So the tree, even though it's somewhere else in another part of the world, is part of my humanity. It's not separate from me. Treating the tree also with dignity and respect. So here, I am because you are, is a phrase always linked to this African theologian, John Mbiti. I am because you are. Since you are, therefore I am. So, but then it's not just that in Xhosa Zulu, we say, Umuntu ngumuntu ngabantu, moto kebato kebato. The difference, this is a saying of proverbs in Africa that is used to enunciate what constitutes this environmental relationship to nature, our relationship to nature. Now, notice that we do not recognize only those who look like us, okay? Not only those who look like us. We recognize not just our own kind, we recognize plants, animals, the unknown. So the relationship is contemporaneous. Not just, well, you are a human being because I see you. You're being because I recognize you, you think like me, you eat like me, you walk like me, you speak like me. But also the environment is part of nature. We recognize all those who are not like us because they constitute part of our humanity. And so this is a way I'm suggesting now that we should begin to think of the environment. This kind of contemporaneous approach. If we take care of nature, nature will take care of us in this way because it reproduces us and stuff like that. We are not separate from nature. So when you go there to the farm, or if you're a hunter, whatever, in some societies, you see that that's why people in hunters, when they go to hunt animal, they don't hunt so they can go and sell in the market. They say, well, they hunt. So let's assume they go to hunt and they catch like a buffalo or antelope. You see that the antelope is used to feed the whole family. It's not for commercial purposes. First of all, you bring it home, you thank the antelope for being a food to you, for allowing you that it serves you as a food. It's not just something for the sake of commercial commodities. No, the antelope, you are what you eat. That is it. You are what you eat. Because they say, well, you thank the antelope, you thank the antelope, say, thank you for allowing me. And then you share with everybody. And this is why there's no waste. There's no waste. So that Every meal. So you see, my grandmother, those days, my great grandmother, after cooking, she will go on the street and she'll be beckoning strangers. Hey, how are you? Hey, fine. And she'll come and eat. Hey, come and eat. And so no, and then people will just come to my house, and eat. The reason is not because it's not just because she's a generous woman, but also waste is also about identity, who we are. The earth, for being said, is part of nature. You don't waste. You get enough you can eat. It's not because you are so rich or so poor, but then you don't waste. But this is how nature takes care of you. I say, well, come and join us because they don't want you to waste and stuff like that. So I want to eat and you become, and so on and so forth. So this is how the thinking about nature, how to shape us, how to think about it, not just the commodity and stuff like that. And I believe that if we begin to see that what we give to nature is what nature gives back to us, I think we'll have a more coherent vision of environment. This kind of contemporaneous way that we are one with nature and nature is one with us. All right. I look forward to further conversations on this, and thank you very much. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for this presentation. I think it was very insightful. So I think we can begin the Q&A session. Just a general directive before we begin. Please raise your hands if you want to ask a question on the microphone. Else you can always drop a question in the chat. So I don't see any raised hands right now. So I guess we can start with the questions on the chat. So let's go in order. So I think the first question was from Gerard Martin. The question is for Pakhi. It reads, thank you for the insight into the situation of nature conservation in India. I share your frustration. My question is, with looking at value as a transaction, does that remove what, in fact, the true value of nature is? Are we weighing the value of nature on a scale that is ill-equipped to measure the true value of nature?
Hi, thanks for the question. And I think, yes, we are definitely weighing nature on an ill-equipped measure because like we cannot really value nature on aspects that are related to money, unless like it's almost like valuing the human life on basis of what monetary benefit a human life on the earth gives you. So I think the measure should be something that Michael maybe spoke about, that everything has its own value, we're all interrelated. And maybe money as a factor is something that should not be considered when we look at the value of nature. Like look at the carbon credits, look at anything that has monetary aspects related to it. It is just something, money is abstract to nature. Like money does not exist in natural environment. And using that as a measure to value whatever the natural aspects of the environment is, it seems absolutely insane. Like bringing money in nature conservation itself is something that is a very abstract concept. And maybe we need to come up with a better scale, which is not money or benefit related. Rather, it is more associated with the kind of, maybe, I don't know what the true scale should be, but it should definitely not be money.
Yeah, so yeah, the next question in the chat was Nivedita, so maybe she can just ask it. She can ask it herself. Yeah.
So first of all, thank you so much for this really lovely talk by both of you. They were both very insightful, and I think towards the end, Michael, I was almost in tears because it was really moving, the way you spoke about African environmental ethics and philosophy. And I think for me, I don't come from an African culture. I come from India, which is a very different culture. And people don't always understand things that are very abstract, so we have things like religious texts to understand things like morals, or we have um, laws to make those values and morals more explicit, that sort of thing. um, but people don't really understand things that are abstract like values and ethics quite that well. So how would you suggest that one person can embody this philosophy you speak about as an individual, and as a person who is not African, would it even be appropriate to integrate this philosophy into our daily life?
Yeah, well, thank you. Um, I understand that it's difficulty, because it's questions of ethics, you see. Question of ethics is always a very, very sensitive matter. Okay, and I'm always respecting people's traditions and cultural background. I think the fundamental premise for me is to recognize that the idea for me is when I begin to think, what is it that I value most in my life? And I say, well, happiness, for example. And when I say that I am because you are, since you are, therefore I am, which means that my humanity only makes sense when I begin to recognize your own humanity, because you are a gift to my humanity. That's the whole point I'm trying to make. That nature is a gift. Difference is a gift, not a threat to me, which means that the more, the merrier. This diversity is what enriches us and stuff like that. Imagine if we are just the same. Imagine if everybody thinks the same. Imagine if we would be so boring and stuff like that. Nature brings this kind of difference, diversity of experience that enriches our life. It's like bringing to the soup, to the pot of life. When you're cooking something, it doesn't just take one ingredient. You bring a lot of ingredients and stuff like that. You put all of them together, and this is what makes it beautiful. They become very tasty. The more, the merrier. If you want to cook soup, you add water and then maybe salt, nobody's going to look at you. But then you bring it in different volumes. You add a little bit, and then balance and stuff like that. This is what the harmony. The goal is harmony. Bringing all of them in kind of equal balance. It's not extremism. I'm not suggesting for extremism. So respecting different perspectives in that kind of equal balance and stuff like that. Nature has a place, but human beings also have I'm not those who say, well, kill all human beings so that nature can live. No, everything has to be together and then balance and stuff like that. Otherwise, it becomes a dogma, and entertain different perspectives and stuff like that. So the fundamental thing is that I'm not preaching dogma here, but also recognizing that difference is a gift. Principle, the kind of what? Okay, let me use a philosophical jargon. A term I use here is a subjective equality, to every beings around us, plants, animals, but also the dead, and also the unborn. Everything together is together. So when tomorrow you go to a restaurant and they give you too much food, take the one you can eat. Give the rest back to those who can eat it and stuff like that. No, you don't have to throw away food. I live in Western society where food, people buy things of 100. Okay, let's talk about water. For example, let's talk about water. I mean, in Netherlands or America, people, they waste like, they have, just to flush one toilet. How much water they waste? How many gallons of water they waste a year? Think about it, for example. Think about it. Or food, they buy all this, they fill the carts, the truck, and then they eat only probably 5% of what they, but the rest is wasted. I'm not suggesting, okay, begin a mission. Of course, feeding the hungry is good, but also balance with nature. So you go, what do you mean? Don't buy $100, buy $2. Maybe that's what you need. It's all this harmony and stuff like that. This is what Ubuntu philosophy is teaching us. This is what I'm doing. Ubuntu philosophy is teaching us. Okay.
Yeah, I think I so agree with you about this, because a lot of my friends in global sustainability science, they have this hobby called dumpster diving. So they actually go and take vegetables, fruits that are pretty fresh, but they just didn't get sold, so they're in the trash, and they take like 5 kilos of tomatoes and 2 kilos of cucumbers and that sort of thing. They go with backpacks full of food to their house, and they think, wow, we are so sustainable. But they are not questioning why this waste is even in the dumpster. They should actually go to the Albert Heijn or to the Yumbo, and then they should just yell at the manager and say, this is not okay. And
yeah,
just
exactly.
be very Karen about it.
And actually, it's linked to the first presenter. And you know what? Let me tell you now. Let's go to politics now. My area of political economy. Let's go to the first presenter. You know that even if it's waste, they're not allowed to give out those food because of capital gain. They're actually prohibited from giving those food out. It's only in certain rare circumstances are they allowed to give it to soup kitchens. But in most cases, they'll just destroy it, like Apple do. Okay, we're not going to sell this anymore. They destroy it completely instead of giving. This is the madness. This is the madness we encounter every day. And this is why humanities is very important. Theology of ecology, philosophy of ecology, all those things becomes very, very important to bring those in balance. So this is it. Rethink those approaches to the environment. That's part of it. When you destroy the environment and culture, you are substantially destroying your soul. You can't negate it. So it's part of, that's why you see that it's spiritual. It is spiritual as it is physical. So that's the spiritual aspect of the environment. So you destroy the environment, your soul is also being wrecked. And sometimes you do certain things, they will not bury you in my culture. They say, no, you don't deserve. You do something that is sacred, that is, you committed a crime against the land, against the earth, against nature. Certain things, so you see, nature do not want you. And if you're a king in Yoruba kingdom, they don't say we reject, I said nature rejects you. And then, not we, it's political. This is in traditional Yoruba, nature rejects you. The earth rejects you. So you go and abdicate. Some things you cannot commit. So this is the thinking about this, how we're connected. We begin to appreciate it and celebrate it as part of who we are. And then you see a difference.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was a great question. Great back and forth. I think Anna Flavia's question kind of got buried in the chat. So maybe you can go ahead and ask it. Then we can move on to Gerard's question and then the question in the chat from Yatin.
Yes, so my question reflects something that I learned in one of my classes, where we learned that it can be argued that humans are natural beings, and therefore whatever their actions are can also be considered as natural. And so this can justify these actions. So my question was for Michael, to what extent do you think this idea of humans' actions being natural because humans are considered as natural beings, to what extent does this idea dominate the current behavior that we have towards nature, and how much of a problem this can be, especially for the future?
Okay, that is a premise. Thank you. That is a premise coming from neoliberal Western modernity and also Darwinism and stuff like that. It's actually a theory of social Darwinism. Also, that social Darwinism, and also, that we are natural, so it's okay for us to conquer people, to dominate others, because the stronger ones dominate the weak ones. And naturalism is dangerous. It's a dangerous philosophy. It is racist. It is colonialist. It is sexist. It is homophobic. Is all kinds of things you can do in the name of naturalism. It means that we cannot negotiate. No, because we are actually, after all, if we go back to rationality, we can negotiate. I mean, nobody goes around saying, well, I feel like going around naked in the street today because I don't want to wash or stretch. No, you say, because shame comes in. Well, maybe you don't want your girlfriend to see you, whatever, or your parents, you're afraid. So no, natural in what sense? Because we're still ethical beings, moral beings. We know what is good or right. Nobody has a baby and they go and throw away the baby. So the idea of natural is actually justification for neo-global capitalism. It is so I don't subscribe to the idea that it's a pretext. It's a pretext for subjugation of nature. It is a pretext for domination and oppression. Okay, so that is a social Darwinism, and it's racist. And it's a lot of things because people do it in the name of naturalism. So it doesn't work for me. I don't think so, because I think that we negotiate and we have choices, moral choices, and we can learn. That's possibility of education. So because of that, I want to argue then that using that kind of argument doesn't work for me. Anybody who's doing that is doing it on purpose. It's almost always for capital. It'll go back to the first presenter, almost always goes to capital. It always goes back to capital again. It's just what it is. So the only natural thing there is that it is a natural pretend. The argument is an epistemic cover for to do all kind of things in the name of logic, in the name of naturalism. So it's not natural at all. So I think because of it's not natural, I don't think we need to worry about that. Anyone who argues that it's natural, I say, no, actually, why don't you walk around naked? Why are you learning English? Why are you speaking Hindi? Why are you cooking better food? Why don't you just eat like someone natural who doesn't have common sense and stuff like that? We're not just abstract beings without common sense. We are beings learning every day, And another thing again is this. We come from culture, okay? We come from culture. So this is very important. Actually, what you can tell them is this. We are all cultural beings, so to speak. And culture is not static or homogeneous. Culture is always evolving. Culture is full of tensions, okay? It's always evolving. So what it means to be an Indian person before 1947 is not the same after the break with Pakistan. What it means to be a Nigerian before during colonialism is not the same. So we are beings who learn, who use our sense to learn, and we evolve every day. We change every day. So again, we encounter, we see what's happening in Sahara Desert. We learn, oh, this is the consequence of our action. So we adjust and stuff like that. So naturalism is the dangerous precedent in philosophy. It doesn't work. Ipso facto, it is a fallacy. It's an intellectual fraud for them to make a claim on naturalism. I'm sorry, this is a little bit harsh, not to you, but to those who argue on naturalism, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. But the next question, let's move on to the question from Gerard. So go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you both the speakers. It's actually, this is a conversation that needs to happen at length. I hope we have enough time for it. But this is a question for both of you. If we're talking about the conservation of nature today, and one of the, there are a couple of catchphrases and very widely used terms, biodiversity, conflict. And as far as conflict goes, and I think this question is just loaded with so many questions at the moment. When someone dies from what we call animal attack, whether it's an animal on the offense or the defense, we just call it an animal attack. The government's response in India, at least, is to compensate. But historically in India, it was we were resigned to the fact. In fact, India had a very, very integrated approach to living with nature, and we didn't have. There was, to start with, there was no we. India is a complete Western construct in itself. But there were so many different peoples, and people who lived in touch with nature or in wilderness were very integrated. So if someone got killed by a tiger, the person got killed by the tiger. There wasn't retribution, there wasn't compensation. The Western approach looks at this as tolerance, but the very fact of using a word like tolerance means that you're tolerating something else. This was just reality. The homogeneity that's come into India now is very Western in thought. We've adopted a lot of even the laws that the British had already put in place, but they were put in place for very different reasons. My question to you is, Michael, where do ethics come in? And to Pakhi, how does capitalism deal with that? Is it possible to bring that back? And is there a midway between these two standpoints that we could actually achieve so that success is on the horizon? Success in conservation. Sorry.
The question is for.
It's for the both.
It's for both of you, and you'd need to arm wrestle to see who goes first.
Okay, I think Pakhi, you win.
So I think when we talk about capitalism and like Western concepts encroaching on like the tolerance in Indian communities when it comes to environment, I think there is a very good relation between communities and wildlife. However, now we're pushing both the wildlife and the communities to the brink, wherein the kind of interaction that happens is more frequent. So if conflict was a one-off situation, it would be more a part of like the part and parcel of the day. But now that it is a repeated offense or defense from part of the animal, It is because neither the communities nor the animal has enough space to live. So it is essentially a concept of competition between the two species. So how do you resolve it? It's honestly giving enough space for both and better planning. So compensation, like you cannot really compensate for a human life, right? So the entire concept that you can pay off, like the monetary aspect of any monetary aspect in the concept of conservation is very flawed, because how do you put this money, the monetary value, to a life, like the life of an animal or a forest or a human being? So I think the only solution to this would be allowing both to thrive in specific spaces and reduce the interaction as far as possible. Because even if someone's okay with like a one-off person dying because of animal attack, it is not okay. So like I think like the conflict situation has gotten worse because of so many developments happening everywhere. Like roads are crisscrossing forest lands and the animal has nowhere to go. So if the animal is in fact attacking a person, it's because it's for its own survival. And the survival, once you solve the situation of survival, once you make the situations for both the species to survive co-independently, I think the situation then itself will solve. And how do you solve the capitalism? I don't know. India is becoming a capitalist nation, and I don't think there is any way that we will stop being a capitalist nation. So maybe I think the only choice is to have better leaders, maybe, and leaders who think of conservation as like an important aspect and not like a bottleneck to like development. So I think it's just like mentality. If someone really wants to protect the environment, bring one conservationist into the entire panel of like policymakers. That itself would make a lot of difference. Like currently, like I'm not sure if you're aware, but the Forest Conservation Act has undergone some amendments, and the entire amendment is written by an industrialist who wants conservation to little mellow down so that development can happen faster. So if you continue on the same path, I don't think there's a solution in place. It is either going to be animals in the zoo, or it is going to be like the West where there are no predators. It is just like some deer, and then hunting down the deers is the only way to control the population. So I think we're going in that direction. So the solution would definitely be have better planners, leaders, and give enough space for both species to like coexist.
Good. I think she said it all. Let me just add one or two sentences here. I don't like the word tolerance. It's a locus of ideological baggage. I don't like it. I hate that tolerance. When I say, hey, we're tolerant, we're tolerant nation. Tolerant nation already suggests that, okay, we are trying to manage the terms. So it's not really, tolerance is not acceptance. Okay, tolerance is far from being unconditional acceptance. So say toleration is not really something that I really want to approach. So that is one, of course. That is part of it. That yeah. So you see it, especially in political philosophy, in the migration policy. So we're a tolerant nation now. It's just a mask for saying that we are not too racist. Oh, we're not too bad. We can live. We can manage. We can manage this. So toleration is complicated. So now, going on with what Pakhi said now, this is actually true and stuff like that. It's even worse in South Africa, because I also live in South Africa. And then with this attack, then they go hunt all the tigers, all the lions in that area, as a kind of a revenge attack on all the animals that a man was killed. So we must kill all the animals that represented that place because human being, yeah, and stuff like that. Or they say, well, or they begin to call animals and stuff like that. But those are mentality, because I'm happy you guys are talking about this, and I really hope that something comes out of it. Now, let me shock you. Environmental ethics, global world is very, very capitalist oriented. Okay, so that you see all these seminars, big conferences, they're all sponsored by big oil, big stuff like that. And they have a narrative that they want to represent, what I call an alibi against bad conscience. Okay, so before they blame us, let us cut it off already. I know, this is not something, it's not a conspiracy theory, this is scholarship. Okay, so it's already so, okay, we want to do this, but they package it in such a way that it becomes capitalist, beneficial in a capitalist way. So we have to transform our environmental politics to be capitalist. So kind of making it into material, commodifying it. So it is good. So in paper, in whatever you say, wow, this is good, they really find out, but it's actually behind it is actually anti-environmental. That is the dilemma we're dealing with now. People like me who are into nature and stuff like that. So instead of So let me just put what Pakhi said. Pakhi said, let's call it confluence of narratives. It's a confluence, a confluence of subjectivities, confluence. So the kiss they go, in the sense that, you know, that dynamic. And I'm not speaking for hybrid. No, it's not gonna. I mean, I don't think I want a lion to come into my living room. No, that would be so scary. That's not what I mean. But a confluence is a confluence. Not toleration does not show equal power. It's always showing one has a superior position to the one who is being tolerated. That is the problem with toleration. It already assumes a location of epistemic, political, cultural, and moral superiority. And that is the danger of the politics of toleration. It is a fine word. You know, literally it sounds nice, but it's not actually. So it's confluence. I'm building on what Pakhi said, confluence of narratives, confluence of histories, confluence of subjectivity. That's the only way we can live with animals and stuff like that. I mean, they in Botswana now, they're clearing, pushing away so that they make spaces for big developers and stuff like that. So don't worry, we'll do the environment. So when you're looking the other side, the environmental protection, they are destroying the other side of the world. They need to get the money somewhere. The money had to come from somewhere. So they have to get the money somewhere. So capitalism, what is capitalism? I mean, you read all those things, basically. Capitalism is not to produce wealth, you need to cheat somebody, you need to get it from somewhere. You need to suppress something to get something about you're smarter. We're doing business. So who wins here is who. I'm able to take more money from all of you. Maybe we place or whatever. This is capitalism, how it works. You need to suppress somewhere to get it somewhere. They need to plug the leak. So if we could do environmental ethics now in the Netherlands, then we'll have to get the money in South Africa or Nigeria or India, whatever the case may be, to plug the one we're losing in Netherlands. So we have to look at it in a holistic way. That's the point. And it's going to be not toleration. Toleration doesn't work for me. Again, I'm sorry that I'm using this very harsh word, but I don't subscribe to toleration. It's easy.
Thank
No,
you.
that makes a lot of sense. Thank you both for your answers. I think we can we're a little over time, so we can wrap up the Q&A session. Very quickly, before we finish off, I'm going to share my screen and oops. Yeah, so we come up with a gift for what it's worth. This is a tree planted by an organization called Sankalp Taru, who plant native trees in several districts of Maharashtra and India. So we have planted a tree for the contributions of both Michael and Pakhi, and also, everyone who has so graciously attended our event today. I think this was a very fruitful discussion. Thank you both, Michael and Pakhi, for agreeing to speak for us today. Thank you all the listeners who came in and attended the webinar. And yeah, this meeting is officially over. I hope you all enjoyed. Have a nice day and stay safe and take care.